What's going on, everybody, and welcome to the No World Order podcast. I'm your host, Drew,
I am Zach.
and we are coming to you from San Diego, California. We are here to have a conversation about truth, knowledge, and our experiences. So make sure to go like, share, follow, subscribe to the channel, anything like that. And now let's get into the episode. So our first episode here is going to be about how we kind of got into the conspiracy or truth movement. So
What pushed you down the rabbit hole?
yeah, exactly. What kind of led us to where we are today? Like actually having a podcast discussing conspiracies and the truth movement and all of that. So you want to go ahead and share your story first about like what age and what started your awakening, I guess?
Yeah, I feel like I'm predisposed to it in a sense. Even at a young age, 5, 6, 7, my dad and I would watch the show Sightings. I don't know if you ever saw that.
I don't think so.
It was on, I remember it was on Saturdays at 10, which was super late for a kid, but
Yeah.
my dad and I would stay up and watch it, and it was about UFOs, it was about Bigfoot, it was all that weird fringe stuff that you didn't get any of in the real world.
Yeah, exactly.
And he had some ghost stories from work. He had a few UFO stories. So as a kid, that shit was way more interesting to me than a history book. So it's always kind of been there. I've always been entertaining it. I remember when I was like 10, my dad got me some UFO, Bigfoot, Unsolved Mysteries book that I tripped out on.
Yeah.
And then when I was in my, let's say, I don't know, early 20s, late teen years, I started to realize that all the world religions and even some like comic book stories and some alien stories all had the same premise. So I started to look into religions of the world, how they tied together, why they were so common, even like the pyramids. There's pyramids everywhere when we weren't able to communicate between continents and things like that.
And the fact that they were able to be built with such precision.
Right.
And we can't even really replicate that today with our technology. So that it is very interesting. The pyramids are
a whole nother topic.
Exactly.
Side note, I hate when people say, oh, well, there was a lot of slaves. No. That's like math and technology. Yeah. It's not just throw slaves at it until
And are these slaves gonna... Okay, so there's a couple things with that. So yeah, this is gonna be a complete side note. But I heard that you couldn't build a pyramid because it was a religious structure, so anybody non-religious couldn't be building that, and the slaves weren't, participating in that. So
interesting.
Yeah, that begs the question, like, who did it? Yeah, exactly. So the pyramids are a weird, interesting thing for sure.
Yeah, that'll be a fun one.
Yeah.
But yeah, I started looking into how that stuff ties together, what it meant, why it meant what it did. I grew up Episcopalian, so Christian. Robin Williams used to say Catholic light, which was funny and accurate. Rest in peace. So I started looking into what I knew first. I started taking catechumenic classes, learning about Jesus, learning about the Bible, all of which still I feel like still hold up today. Mm-hmm. The stories are even more relevant now. It's really weird. But my big one, the one that really pushed me down the rabbit hole, was 9/11. I know, and stick with me, I'm going to go all over the place here, but I know after 9/11, Charlie Sheen had some questions, and everyone thought he was crazy because he had that big bipolar breakdown. But he said it, not in so many words, but that it looked a little hokey, or it looked staged, or it looked a little off.
Yeah, there was something off about it.
Yeah, and at the time I was like, this fool's crazy, of course. Mm-hmm. And then my dad actually experienced a lot of mental health issues. So in trying to help him, I learned about mental health. I learned about bipolar disorder, and he had not a lack of concepts, but he thought a train basically could get from here to Texas in like 5 minutes. Like that's what the bipolar was doing to him. But he also saw fact where everyone else didn't see anything. Mm-hmm. He was able to see the smallest thing, and with no proof, he just knew it was true. And I started to catch on to that, and I started to try and figure out what the hell is it about bipolar disorder that makes you kind of seem like you don't make any sense mostly, but then also gives you this like sixth sense where you just know if things are
This
true or not.
insight, yeah.
Yeah, it's like you're tapping into a different realm. It was the most growth I think I've done since being like a teenager and physically growing. It was more of a mental, spiritual growth, but it was crazy. So when I figured out my dad has bipolar, but he's able to see shit that nobody else can see. Charlie Sheen has bipolar. And he was questioning 9/11. I kind of was like, well, in a weird way, I feel like I owe it to my dad to like look into the 9/11 thing.
Yeah.
Like it was an experiment and a study in mental health and bipolar and all sorts of shit. And I started looking into it and kind of just like tugging a string on a sweater. Once you get a good one, the whole thing goes up in smoke. The whole 9/11 story
just starts to unravel.
It starts to unravel, and once one thing makes sense, two more things don't make sense, and then four things don't make sense, and it's a house of cards.
Yeah.
And if you really objectively start to look at it, the story that we've been given is not even close to being accurate.
Yeah, no.
Again, I'm sure 9/11 is a whole nother pod in and of itself.
Definitely.
But for instance, there was like NORAD, they're supposed to intercept any planes or anything in the sky that aren't American, that are foreign. They're supposed to go knock them down. They were busy doing a war games exercise, and that was, I believe, the one day that Dick Cheney was in charge of NORAD. Like no one had ever, like he had never done that. No vice president had ever been in charge, but for whatever reason on that one day, 9/11, Dick Cheney was in charge of it. There were no like engines found at the scene of 9/11 except for one, and it wasn't even from the type of plane that was hijacked.
Yeah.
So just little stuff, and again, once you start to pull at them, none of it makes any sense. But it's hard to discuss and talk about 9/11 or learn about 9/11 and how it doesn't really match up without branching off into other shit.
Oh, yeah.
So that was kind of my catalyst. That was my, okay, I have a whole new look on life. I remember looking at stuff, watching these videos, and when I finally realized that it was not a plane going into the building, like I got scared. I was like, oh, holy shit, the FBI is going to knock down my door. I figured something out.
Yeah.
Like it was terrifying, but you know, that didn't happen. And then you start to learn more and more, you get a bigger picture. And it kind of starts to take shape, and it starts to change your paradigm about everything. And you just continue on that path. I think that's how it is for most. What was yours?
So initially, like I've always had this kind of, questioning brain, and that's interesting that you said your dad had these kind of ghost stories. I think there's a lot of similarities between our dads and stuff the more we talk and kind of get to know each other.
That's true.
Because he always had a couple as well, being in the military.
Yep.
Just being in the shop late at night, hearing things. So there was very,
whole nother episode we'll have to do on
exactly.
stories our dad told us.
Exactly. So there was that very early on, and there was another one he always said when like there was three of them in the car. It was him, my mom who was sleeping at the time, and like a friend or a cousin or something like that, someone close, and my dad and the cousin both saw something, like, when they were driving, like, in the middle of the night in the road or something. Both have the same story, same everything, but my mom was asleep, and go figure, because she's the one who's religious and, like, you know, doesn't question anything like that. And
skeptic? Is she skeptic?
Super skeptical. So it would have been interesting if she would have saw something.
Right.
But, yeah, so that was always pretty early on, hearing those stories. And then, I mean, around, I want to say 6th, 7th grade, which I believe was around 2003-ish, somewhere around there. In middle school, 6th, 7th grade, going over to some buddy's house and, like, I don't know, doing a deep dive on the internet and coming across like celebrity deaths like Kurt Cobain, the Tupac 7-Day Theory, and a couple years later, the Paul McCartney and the whole Beatles thing. And so that was kind of what really like took a hold on me. Like I've always been into that kind of stuff. I've always had that questioning brain and kind of things that don't line up and make sense. But around this time also, like History Channel and A&E, they always had like Ancient Aliens and those paranormal shows and things like that.
Ghost hunters and stuff.
Exactly. So I got hooked on all of that, and it's funny just watching that now, seeing what it is. But that definitely got me hooked onto like the train of thought of where I am today. And then the biggest one is very similar to yours, but around like 2007, I came across this movie, or these couple of movies, one called Zeitgeist and then one called Loose Change. And Zeitgeist was really big in influential for me because it was touching on all of these conspiracies and truths and all of that. It was going from religion and how, kind of like how you were saying, how the story has been passed around before the Bible that we know it, before the, Christianity. Like the same story has been presented in the past multiple times. So it was going through that and how religion is kind of a scam. And then it was getting into like the Federal Reserve banking system, and then it was exposing 9/11 and like false flags and all these kinds of things. So it was a very pivotal movie for me because, yeah, the whole 9/11 thing, the more you look into it, the more, like we were talking about, it ravels. The mainstream story just unravels. And it's interesting because when you first initially go into the truth about 9/11, you have one opinion on it, and then the more that time has passed, you find other stories that have kind of gone on. But and then the other biggest one, so a few years passed, but late 2012 when December 2012, Sandy Hook, that whole situation happened. And immediately you saw the gun control agenda, and this was the first time I was introduced into like crisis actors and information being pulled from YouTube, because I remember watching certain videos and then going back to them or trying to find them a little while later, like 6 months later, completely gone. And I still can't find some of these videos and some of these things that they were pointing out. And I know a lot of people or some people, especially like Alex Jones, have gotten in trouble for saying Sandy Hook was a hoax and all of that. But when you look into it, man, like Eddie Bravo says, look into it. There's just some things that don't add up. There's definitely a lot of things that don't add up. Yep. And so that was a big one. And then just keeping with it, like late 2015 and all through 2016, the rapper B.O.B. released his Elements mixtape series, and that was touching on everything. And it felt good to kind of have someone in an artistic way be able to validate kind of everything I've been looking up and researching. He was talking about false flags, hoaxes, clones, flat earth. He was big pharma, exposing that. He had this one song back in the day where he was talking about how they gave HIV in through this medication and stuff. And so he's always been on exposing the truth. He's always had that. But this series of mixtapes is just kind of what validated everything and was pretty interesting. So, there's other little things like the Mandela effect and things like that.
That's like one of the fun ones for me. I'm like, when I need to take a break from like the serious shit,
exactly.
Let's go to Mandela and talk about Sinbad.
Exactly. So there's just little things like that kind of branch off. But, that's kind of where I'm at, and that's kind of my basic story, the somewhat laid out foundation of kind of why I am the way I am, the kind of information I've come across along my way. And, there, like I said, there's more to it, obviously. There's things that I'm not even touching on, but that's kind of the basic bullet points of kind of what has led me to where I'm at.
Right.
So
And I think that's important for people who aren't necessarily doing what we're doing, thinking what we're thinking, to know. Like, yeah, we were normal once too. Like, we believed in all that stuff too.
Yeah,
but
we were there.
We were there. I remember I was very, very like pro-America, pro-government, pro-fucking cops.
Yeah,
like,
I wanted to be in the military growing up, and that I'm assuming is because my dad was in the military and wanting to kind of like live up to that. But
for sure,
that went away pretty early on. But yeah, it's just one of those things. Like you say, as a kid, you want to be a cop, you want to be a firefighter, you want to be in the military, you want to do all these like authoritarian type positions, which is I guess you could say the brainwashing is real because they put it on you pretty quickly.
Right. Yeah, no kidding. Especially growing up in it. That's all you see.
Yeah.
That's all you hear.
So, yeah, I think that'll do it for this one. I think that's a pretty basic kind of a foundation for
intro.
Yeah, our start and how we kind of got into it. So we're going to keep it going, keep the content coming. So make sure to like, share, subscribe. And until next time, everybody, peace.